can make it available for everybody else who unfortunately is not able to be here tonight. But join me in welcoming Professor Marino, and thanks again, everybody, for being here. As usual, we leave questions if there are at the end. You are welcome to put them in the chat or to ask them directly. Prego.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I would like to thank the Alberto Italian Studies Institute and particularly its director, Dr. Gabriella Romani, for this very kind invitation. Gabriella, thank you very much for your too generous introduction. My presentation will focus mainly on healthcare, education, and on innovation in both sectors, which is Jefferson's main mission. And I will speak about the role of artificial intelligence in healthcare nowadays. Now, let's see. I have the problem in advancing the slide that 1 second. I think I should do this. I don't understand why I cannot.
You might need to come out and then do it manually.
Okay. Okay, yeah, you're probably right. Okay. Yes, thank you, Gabriella. The way healthcare is delivered today has changed significantly in the past few decades. Patients' well-being has improved dramatically, and we can now save lives that once were doomed, thanks, for example, to laparoscopic and robotic surgery, stents for heart surgery, transplantation, new drugs like statins, radiology, and imaging technology. All these things, they look very normal and familiar to us, but all these things, you believe it or not, did not exist when I graduated in medicine, and this was not 200 years ago. Just to provide you with an example, for decades, the only reliable method to diagnose an abdominal tumor was explorative laparotomy. Explorative laparotomy is a fancy word that is coming from the ancient Greek, but basically means open the abdomen and look inside. And you believe or not, until the 80s, so only 30 years ago, this was the most common operation ever performed every single day in every operation, in any operating room all over the planet. And this was because we did not have, until the early 80s, ultrasound. We did not have a CT scan. We did not have MRI. So in order to make a diagnosis, was literally necessary to open the abdomen and look inside. If you look at this slide, you will quickly realize that in the...
Ignazio, scusami ti interrompo, ma non c'è il PowerPoint. Non lo vediamo. Non hai fatto share, forse. Adesso sì.
Però non riesco. 1 second. Non capisco perché non mi... I can understand why doesn't let me, because usually it does it.
Provo io da qui, visto che ho anch'io il PowerPoint.
Yeah, I changed it a little bit, but
Yeah.
let me give a last. Could you see it now?
No.
Uh, now?
See.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, now it's working. So basically, if you look at these slides, you will realize that medicine has changed more in the last few decades than in the past 2,000 years. You know, the first really rudimental kind of antibiotics was developed about 100 years ago. And only in 1950, the smoking of a cigarette was considered a possible problem for our health. Before was not considered a problem. And again, in the 50s, Watson and Crick, for the first time ever, discovered our DNA. In 1954, the first successful solid organ transplant was.
Did you hit the right one?
Yes.
Was performed.
And
a few years later, the first.
Okay, you had it. Go back and do it again. Okay, drag the.
Okay.
May I go ahead?
In.
Yeah, the first successful heart transplant was performed by Christian Barnard in Cape Town, and you know, and later on in the last few years we developed new very powerful drugs at the point that now we are able to control and treat a deadly disease like HIV. I would like you to look at this slide because it's really astonishing. If we put the life expectancy of the Homo sapiens, of a human being, and we realize that for about 3 million years, the life expectancy did not change until the late 1800. The average life expectancy of a woman was about 42 years, and of a man 35, 36 years. Obviously, there were people that lived much longer, 80 or 90, but the average life expectancy was what you see in this graph. And you see that at the beginning of the industrial era, when cities like London started to have a large number of inhabitants, London by 1850 got to a number of 1 million people living in the same city. Everything started to change rather quickly, and the life expectancy increased exponentially. You see that compared to a woman that was born 100 years ago, now in Europe, the life expectancy of a woman is double, from 40 years to more than 80 years. And why is this important? This is important because obviously, if you live longer, which is a good thing, you also need to have healthcare for a longer period of time, and healthcare obviously needs more resources, human resources and financial resources. Here, I just want to show you how money is spent for healthcare around in the world. Globally, and obviously this is about almost 190 countries, the expenditures is about 8.3% of the GDP, so $1,200. In Mexico is, for example, much lower, is 5.8 of the GDP, so $500. And you see in the USA is now above $10,000 per year per person, which is about 17% of the GDP. If you see these numbers, you would immediately think that probably the life expectancy is much higher in USA than in other countries. And here, instead, we see that that is not the fact. USA are ranking only 19 as age standardized debt, and there are 18 countries above and in front of USA, starting with Australia, which is number 1, Italy number 2, Spain number 3. And what these countries do have in common compared to United States, they have in common one single thing: they have a national healthcare system. So basically, access to healthcare is for everybody. You know, and doesn't really matter, you know, if you're rich or poor, and where you live in each of these countries, you have the same right. You can be treated in the same way. We have obviously, considering these facts, we have a significant ethical issue, because health costs rise by year. New drugs and new technology also save lives, but at the same time are very expensive. I just give you an example. As Gabriela mentioned before, I'm a transplant surgeon, and my main area was and is liver transplantation. One of the most deadly disease in hepatology, in liver, is hepatitis C. And until a few years ago, 60% of the patients in need of a liver transplant, they needed that because they had a liver destroyed by the virus of hepatitis C. In 2014, there was a breakthrough discovery, and a new drug by the name of sofosbuvir was introduced, and is a terrific advance in medicine, because that drug is capable to kill the hepatitis C virus. So, you know, a few decades from now, we will not have anybody on the planet with that deadly disease. But the treatment in this country in 2015 was costing $84,000 per patient. So you treat the patient, you save the life, but you need to spend almost $100,000 per single patient. At this point, I would like to also introduce another concept. Health really goes beyond the health system. And this was stated very well by Richard Horton. Dr. Horton is the editor-in-chief of the journal The Lancet. The Lancet is the most important medical and scientific journal in medicine in Europe, and is the second in the world with New England Journal of Medicine. Editor Horton stated that we, in order to really have the ability to treat the patients in these days and to do prevention of disease, we need to promote incentives to ensure adherence to good policies to facilitate good choices. For example, taxes on sugar, taxes on cigarettes. Engage the industry to address conflict of interest. communicate better to improve solidarity, and achieve goals together for ourselves and also for the future generation. At Jefferson, in the last few years, we wondered, why can healthcare be disruptive and join in the consumer revolution? We believe there are three things that need to happen. Healthcare needs to be digital, it needs to be global like other industries, and we need to decide what humans do and what robots do. Technology by itself is not the real disruptor. Today, technology is at the heart of nearly every transformation, but it's still the means to an end. New technology comes and goes, but the customer-centric principle remains. Being not customer-centric is the biggest threat to any activities. If we look at any disrupted industry, we will always find an underlying customer-related problem. Customers are always dissatisfied. Customers want something better. Many of the killed business used to be great companies. However, they got lost along the way. Perhaps they got too comfortable. They had the money to access technology, but they decided to pursue a different route. We can argue that none of the industries mentioned in my slides are dead. However, some of them are in survival mode right now. And this is also the case for most of health systems in the planet. Amazon, for example, did not kill the retail industry. They did it to themselves with bad customer services. Netflix did not kill Blockbuster. They did it to themselves with their late payment fees. Uber did not kill the taxi business. They did it to themselves with their limited number and fare control. Apple did not kill the music industry. They did it to themselves by forcing people to buy full-length albums. And Airbnb did not kill the hotel industry. They did it to themselves with limited availability and pricing options. We go back to the main point. Technology by itself is not the real disruptor. One of the Jefferson best achievements is that we started something called digital innovation in consumer experience, which is a group of about 45 app developers who try to solve problems in ways used to solve them in other consumer industries. That led, for example, to the virtual rounds team. You know, you probably have any one of us had this kind of experience, a family member in the hospital, round happen in the morning, we cannot be there. And then we start to ask to our family member what the doctor said. Did you ask this? Well, today, actually, there is really no sense if you have mom or dad in the hospital that you have to ask all these questions. We have the technology. It's not a technology problem. So we send video conference software out to families, and they are now part of our rounds. We usually talk about patient-centered care like it's a marketing campaign, but figuring how to use technology to actually be more human is what we are most proud of. Using robotics, we could actually get a more human experience, and the patient does not have to drive for 3 hours to be, checked about his recovery, for example, from a surgical procedure. I would like also to show you what the patient population nowadays is expecting from healthcare and from doctors. These numbers are really, to me, impressing. Every time I read them, I get really impressed. 71% of the patient's population expect doctors to have online scheduling with comparative rates by 2018. 65% expect that there will be social networking opportunities to discuss healthcare related topics and compare providers. 92% expect to have full two-way electronic communication with their providers. 83% expect that they will be able to access all their patient information as they do with their bank account online. 78% expect to have total access to family members' inpatient charts and that they will be able to participate in rounds in person or, as we shown before, virtually. Standard & Poor's global ratings on healthcare sector have been negative for now several years. Their outlook on health service companies is negative, and this has led to weaker patient volume trends that have contributed to companies' struggles, placing pressure on ratings. Standard & Poor's assigned very low rating to these companies, contributing to further degradation of the rating distribution of the health service portfolio. And I think this vignette is pretty clear. You know, you have the president of an hospital talking with the other administrator and say, instead of risking anything new, let's play it safe by continuing our slow decline into obsolescence. What we think will happen in the next several years. Already by last year, 25% of the hospital with at least 1 billion of net revenue were providing real-time genomic-based decision support at the time of writing a prescription. We expect that by next year, 2022, 20% of the population with chronic condition were relying on virtual health assistance for wellness and management. By 2025, 35% of all the care in the US will be delivered virtually. And by 2027, the majority of interaction will be virtual or remote. And the majority of those involved artificial intelligence or machine cognition application. Oops, what I did now wrong. Okay. No, okay. Now I want to concentrate a little bit on artificial intelligence in healthcare. We really need new tools to face unprecedented global challenge. And obviously I'm talking with something that is that everybody is very familiar with, is the coronavirus pandemic. And we all know the difficulty that we had at the very beginning in making the diagnosis. The coronavirus is not only a terrible and unprecedented problem in healthcare, but also created a significant financial problems worldwide because many countries had to exercise lockdown for several months. And obviously lockdown is a disease by itself, because if you need to lock down a country, the economy will be really at risk, and then the future well-being of the population will be at risk. So we started to work on a project in order to make the diagnosis of coronavirus rather quickly and not invasive. The study is especially critical to frontline healthcare workers. The motto is save healthcare workers so they can save us. based on voluntary participation, provides anonymity, does not use personal data nor geolocalization information, and operates in full compliance with the European and US privacy regulation, the so-called HIPAA in the US and GDPR in Europe. No wires, no needles, no pain. It simply involves placing a smartwatch and a smartphone on the individual for about 10 minutes. Data are initially needed only from 90 individuals to test the system, 30 in each of 4 categories: healthy versus asymptomatic, asymptomatic versus symptomatic but not severe, symptomatic not severe versus symptomatic severe admitted in the intensive care unit. Thus, with the smartwatch and smartphone pairs, we collect data in parallel, and we had about 9 hours of data collected. And in about 2 or 3 days, we were able to train an artificial intelligence engine with neural networks. And within 2 weeks after that, the neural networks can be placed on a smartphone and tested in the field to enable widespread adoption. Researchers demonstrate that the COVID Deep's efficient artificial intelligence neural network can differentiate between healthy participants tested COVID-19 negative, asymptomatic tested COVID positive but without symptoms, or even symptomatic positive that needs hospitalization, using only a small field of clinical biometric data obtained not intrusively from off-the-shelf wearable medical sensors. Following further validation, the solution could help in triaging people for target viral and antibody testing, getting them to self-quarantine sooner, get treatment faster, and most importantly, enable the world to get back and to restart the world economy. COVID Deep does not require the presence of a nurse or a physician during testing. It uses physiological signals extracted using commercial available device and achieves high test accuracy. As a result, it provides a testing mechanism that is accurate, easily accessible to public, and easy for individuals to use. Furthermore, this mechanism only requires a few minutes of data collection from an individual. Thus, COVID Deep, as we called it, has the potential to impact on how we screen for COVID-19 and subsequently triage the use of other diagnostics resources. Results suggested a promising tool in the future, and we are now proceeding with a much larger validation testing on about 10,000 people. The validation study is especially critical to frontline work healthcare workers. In October 2020, during the pandemic, we published our first paper entitled COVID Deep SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 test based on wearable medical sensors and efficient neural networks, and it was accepted and now is published online and available to everybody. In other words, we need to re-examine our roles in the age of artificial intelligence. Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is teachable. In the age of artificial intelligence, physicians must be the humans in the rooms. And obviously, we cannot push the envelope too much. We cannot ask to have our iPhone as primary physician care. However, we really need to work on what the human being is going to do and what the robot is going to do. And starting from the beginning, I believe that we are still selecting the students when they enter in the medical school, basically on 3 criteria: science grade point average, GPA, the medical college admissions test, MCAT, and the organic chemistry performance. And then somewhat we are amazed that these doctors were not or are not empathetic, communicative, creative, which we really need, because I'm personally convinced that a few years from now, our CT scanner, our MRI will be read and more accurately by a machine than by a human being. So the human being needs to play its role and needs to be empathetic, communicative, and also creative if you want science to continue to advance. So at Jefferson, for example, we introduced the humanities in the medical school curriculum. Like things like creative writing and the empathy project, and also many other things like history of medicine, art, because we believe that we need to educate the leaders in a different way, and giving them more education in humanities will probably make them better doctors. At our medical college, we also created the, sorry, one second. I want to see one more thing here. We created the Jefferson Scale of Empathy, an internationally known and validated instrument to measure empathy in the context of educating healthcare professionals. We also encourage medical students to add humanities, and we actually are starting to see the difference. We also are doing any possible effort to promote international mobility among our students. We believe that the ability to understand different cultures will also help tremendously their behavior as excellent physicians. Therefore, Jefferson is promoting several international programs that enhance collaboration among foreign professionals, students, health systems. In Europe, and especially in Italy, Jefferson is promoting several partnerships and activities. This is my last slide, and is a program which I'm very proud of. Obviously, as you can tell by my accent, I'm from Italy, and in order to start to practice in this country, I had to go through several different exams. And I always found interesting that if you have a great manager, he could be a manager of a great industry in Europe, and can then move to United States. The same happened for the pilot of an airplane, which is highly technical and sophisticated job. He can work for American Airlines, and then next year he can work for Lufthansa. A doctor, even if he's the best cardiothoracic surgeon at Cambridge, England, cannot come here and perform a surgery or another operation. So we developed 3 years ago a new pathway where the very selected students are attending the medical school for 3 years at Jefferson, United States, and for 3 years at the Catholic University in Rome, Italy. And at the end, they will get an MD degree, which will allow them to practice in all the 27 countries, states of Europe, in all the 50 states of United States. And I really do believe that this will eventually bring to new leaders and to a global physician that with a global understanding that we really desperately need nowadays. Gabriella mentioned Caravaggio at the beginning, and I close with this slide that I really love. Is a Picasso painting, and which shows two women that are running hand in hand, because I really do believe that technology and human beings need to run hand in hand in order to be successful. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm sorry for the little mistakes I made at the beginning with showing the slides, and obviously I'm here ready to listen to comments or questions. Thank you very much again to Professor Romani.
Thank you, Professor Marini, for this very, very rich and thought-provoking presentation. Can I ask you, Ignazio, to take the PowerPoint off, unless you still need it, but so we're gonna leave. All right, great. I know that the Dean of the Nursing School wanted to participate, but she had a meeting, so we're gonna record. This is gonna be of great interest for all those who couldn't be here now, and unfortunately with the terrible password problem, we're not even able to get in if they wanted to be. But let me ask you one question, and then if there are any others, please write in the chat or raise your hand and I'll give you. I know that the issue of empathy has always been very dear to you. You talk about it also in your old book, Credere e Curare, and the importance that there is this pact of trust and understanding between the physician and the patient. And you talked about how that's still indispensable, even in artificial intelligence time and era, that is going to be. So can you elaborate a little more on the connection between studying, for example, the humanities, studying foreign cultures, studying subjects that are not so immediately connected to science and to the medical profession, but that you believe, as you said, that is a very crucial aspect in the end in the development of good practices in medicine?
Well, I do believe that, as I mentioned before, you can teach empathy, and empathy is, therefore is different from sympathy. And I do believe that we really need to focus nowadays on the human aspect of a physician. I personally get very upset when I enter in an intensive care unit and you have all the physicians looking at the computer screen, and obviously it's true that on the computer screen they can learn a lot about the blood work of the patient, the chest X-ray, the MRI, the CT scan, but I really do believe that it's tremendously wrong to enter in the room, look at the technology and ignore the patient, and then at the end, you know, look at the patient and say, Mr. Smith, how you doing today? Like, you know, it's just something in the room and not the main subject of their work in that particular room. So I think humanities are really important because you will more easily develop the ability to talk to the patient, to express yourself in a language that is not a jargon that they do not understand. And I also believe, to make a practical example, I think that as we have seen in the slides, medicine had made tremendous progress in the last few decades. If you think that just in the 50s, so half a century ago, the ventilator, the important machine that saved many COVID patients, hundreds of thousands COVID patients that could not breathe any longer by themselves, did not exist. That machine did not exist 70 years ago. So, and I'm pretty sure that we will have more and more and more. And if I have to tell you, when I get to the bedside and I sit at the bedside and I touch the abdomen of a patient with a liver disease with my hand, do I acquire more information than I can just looking at the computer screen and the MRI or the CT scan? The answer is no. But that intimate gesture, establish a human relationship, which I believe needs to be there now and in the future, whatever technology we will have, because at the end of the day, the relationship between a doctor and a patient is a relationship between two human beings, and one of the two is looking for somebody that has the knowledge to take care of his disease, but also the empathy, so he can perceive that he will be there until the danger of the disease is not gone away.
I see a couple of questions here in the chat. One is, are there medical practices in the United States very different from those in Europe, and how, if they are? So for those who've never had an experience, let's say, with medical practices in Europe, how are there differences?
Well, the main difference is not really in the medical practice. For example, if you enter in an operating room here in the United States, or in an operating room in London or Rome or Berlin, basically you see the same technology, the same tools, and everybody moving more or less in the same way. What is really different is the access to healthcare. In this country, until a few years ago, there were about 40 to 50 million people without healthcare insurance that did not really have any real chances to access to healthcare. And up to today, is really sad to say that the United States of America spending almost 17% of the GDP in healthcare, have the highest rate of leg amputation for diabetes complication. And why is that? Because if I do not have a medical insurance, and I do not have money, and I have a very high glucose in my blood, so I feel very bad, and somebody take me to an emergency room, by law, the emergency room needs to take care of myself. But as soon my blood sugar is back to normal, they put me back on the street, and nobody's going to follow up on me. And if you do this many times, eventually you're going to lose, because of complication, your kidney function, or your eyes, or your legs.
Also, another interesting question I see here is the idea of a global physician. What about, you were talking about this program that allows medical students to study in the US or Italy or Europe, other places. what are the advantages, or do you see also, in view of this mobility of people, people who live part of their life in one country and then they move to another, do you see this idea in the future of a global physician?
Well, I see it slightly different. When I'm using this word global physician, I'm mainly referring to that new curriculum that we established here at Jefferson, to have students taking their courses in 2 different continents. Ideally, they should be taken in all the continents. And I explain better what I mean. I really don't believe, Gabriella, that a student that studies in United States, even the best possible medical school, and the same in Europe, the best possible medical school, has a real understanding of the pro and the con of the medical system and the healthcare system in the other continent. He obviously has several ideas because he reads or she reads the medical literature, but one thing is reading, one thing is experiencing. And I really do believe that the solution for the future is in the middle. We need to have leaders in the future that understand different healthcare system, and only by understanding different healthcare system, they will be eventually able to develop new pathways, new way to treat the patients, a sick person, wherever this person will be. And one really dramatic example is the pandemic with COVID-19. At this particular point, we are convinced that because we have more than 50% of US citizens that got the first dose of the vaccine, we are safe. And we are not, because this virus has been known from 1960 to have a really rapid mutation. And, if we don't care about people living in South Africa or South America or in some other, or India, where they do not have access so far to the vaccine, the virus will continue to replicate. The virus do not need a passport to cross a border, and we will be in the same situation in a year or so, and we will need a new vaccine. I mean, the healthcare, particularly when you have to confront huge problems like a pandemic, is not local. It cannot be local.
So is there a concept of a global healthcare system?
Absolutely, absolutely. And is a word that we use often at Jefferson because unfortunately, Philadelphia is one of the cities in the United States with the, we have seen at the beginning of my speech, the table with the life expectancy and how it changed in the last century. In Philadelphia, you believe or not, but there are scientific papers showing this. Based on the zip code, you have a life expectancy difference up to 15 years. 15 years of difference in the same city in North America, just based on the zip code where you live.
I see a hand, Mark Anthony Dutz, go ahead. And then we're going to close this wonderful presentation.
Dottore, very good presentation. I noticed you mentioned, and this was a big conversation I was having with different doctors, because my uncle was a doctor, rest in peace now, who studied here at Seton Hall and at Padua University for his medical, Dr. Kaluri. But we used to have a discussion about when he started medicine, he started in 1957 after he finished his residency.
You fraud.
And he was able to charge patients $5, and he built a practice on that, on $5 a person, right, a visit. And then in 1968, when Medicare came out, the government required $12 a visit, and basically medical visits doubled from $6 in 1967 to $12 in 1968. So do you think there's a way that we could control the cost of medicine, or because of technology and advances, it's just going to keep on going up and up and up?
Well, it's for sure you can put a cap to the salary of the doctors, and I believe there are some doctors that, particularly in some specialties, that are making too much money. But the reality is not. I don't think that is the cost of the medical examination. The reality, I think, is the fact that you know, you can. I'll give you an example. When I was a medical student or a very young physician in the early 80s, we were taught that if we were taking call in the emergency room and somebody that is a 91-year-old, otherwise healthy with you know, good blood sugar, good kidney function, you know, oriented, but has a heart attack, you should speak with the family and say, look, your grandpa had a very long life, and he has been lucky. He's 91-year-old. You should probably take him home, have the family together, and let him pass in peace. If this will happen now, as we speak, in one of the you know, tertiary medical center of this country, in the next 5 hours, the 91-year-old boy will have probably 3 stents in the coronary artery and will live for many years. But obviously, this is terrific if that is our grandpa. But the cost for the society is obviously much higher. This is why I'm saying, I told before that there are not only financial, not only technological, but not only human, but also, you know, we have ethical issue, because, you know, science will make more progress, and this will be more expensive. Putting 3 stents in an angio room with the most sophisticated technology is obviously much more expensive than taking the patient to die peaceful at home.
One, I have seen here another question about the concept of empathy in the relationship between patient and physician. I think the effects extend beyond common sense, but it can affect also the patient's response at a physiological, even molecular level. Your opinion about that, please.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more. I could give you hundreds of examples in my practice. If you are able to establish you know, empathy with the patient will follow much easier what you are asking him to do, will not skip medication, will and will probably do much better. And it's not only following the medication, following the prescription, but it's also, you know, the feeling to be in good hands. I strongly believe that that is part of the cure.
Was there, okay, one very last by Douglas? Prego.
Yeah, so it's an absolute honor to talk to you, Dr. Marino. So just some context, before I came to Seton Hall 4 weeks ago as the new Assistant Director of International Programs, I was the Study Abroad Program Director at St. John's University in Rome. So I led a lot of programs with urban planning and design. So I use actually your mayoralship and a lot of the things you put in place as some case studies. In my mind, you're like the Ernesto Nathan of the 21st century, even during that 2.5-year period. So thank you. You talked about the beginning, about the increase of life expectancy and urbanization during the 19th century. And I'm kind of thinking about what you think about kind of the healthcare outcomes as they relate to like the modern urban environment. Like while you're mayor of Rome, opening up bike lanes, pedestrianization, you closed a lot of famous piazzas, which sometimes had some blowback, right? For people walking around, opening up the Metro C line, green areas, trying to address waste disposal, which is a big issue in Rome. So like when you think about this kind of holistic approach, kind of having a 21st century piano regolatore for health, like what do you think about in terms of like looking at like how we design cities in Philadelphia or Rome or wherever?
You made a very good point. The designing the cities of the future will be very important for healthcare, and you're absolutely right. You know, there are very important downside in the process that is going on all over the world of living in mega cities compared to living in rural areas. At the beginning, actually, that was important because nobody really stressed this issue, but the decrease of mortality for infectious disease is much more related to the fact that living in an organized urban area, you have clean water. Clean water has been more important than antibiotics and many other things. So clean water really changed dramatically our life expectancy. But nowadays we are going the opposite direction. We are living in polluted cities. We expose ourselves to a lot of stress from the noise of a siren, or the struggle to get on a subway or on a bus. We breathe a lot of bad things related to the pollution, and yes, we need to and we are working also at Jefferson about the urban design of the cities of the future.
Okay, on this note, I would like to thank Professor Marino for joining us tonight. I would like to thank everyone for coming. If you know of anyone who has missed because of the password or other engagements they had, please let them know that there will be a recording available starting tomorrow. So thanks again. I wish good health to everyone and a wonderful end of the semester in whatever university you're working or you are at. And thanks again, Ignazio, for this wonderful presentation.
No, thank you, Gabriela, for your kind invitation. Thank you for these wonderful and very interesting questions. And, if you need me in the future, I'll be very happy to join you for other lectures. And again, have a wonderful weekend and stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.